July 2, 1937. Somewhere over the central Pacific Ocean, a twin-engine Lockheed Electra aircraft carrying the world's most famous aviator and her navigator vanished from radar, from radio contact, and from history. No confirmed wreckage was ever found. No confirmed remains were ever identified. What happened to Amelia Earhart in those final hours over the Pacific has never been conclusively answered. Amelia Earhart was not just a pilot. She was a symbol. The first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. A record breaker, an author, a lecturer, a fashion designer, and one of the most recognizable faces in America. By 1937, she had already accomplished more than most aviators dream of. But the one achievement that still eluded her was the most ambitious, a circumnavigation of the globe along its longest possible route, as close to the equator as possible. The planned route was extraordinary. Starting from Oakland, California, flying east across the United States, across the Atlantic to Africa, across Africa and the Middle East, across India, Southeast Asia, Australia, and then the most dangerous leg of all, the vast open Pacific Ocean. The final destination was Howland Island, a tiny speck of land barely 2 miles long sitting in the middle of the Pacific, and then back to California. Total distance, approximately 29,000 miles. Her navigator was Fred Noonan, one of the most experienced aerial navigators in the world. Noonan had helped map Pan American Airlines' famous China Clipper routes across the Pacific. He was known as an expert at celestial navigation, using the stars and the sun to pinpoint position over open ocean. Despite a personal struggle with alcohol that had cost him his position at Pan Am, he was widely considered the best choice for the most challenging navigational leg of the journey. By early July 1937, Earhart and Noonan had completed 22,000 miles of their journey. They were in La, New Guinea, the last major airstrip before the most dangerous stretch. Ahead of them lay 2,500 miles of open Pacific Ocean, with no land in sight until the tiny target of Howland Island. They took off at midnight local time on July 2, 1937. It was the last time anyone confirmed seeing them alive. The United States Coast Guard cutter Itasca was stationed near Howland Island to serve as a radio beacon for Earhart's approach. The ship's radio operators made contact with Earhart multiple times during the final hours of the flight. But the communications were troubled from the start. Earhart could hear the Itasca but appeared to be having difficulty hearing their responses. The frequencies they were using were incompatible, a miscommunication that may have proved fatal. The last confirmed radio message from Earhart was received at 8:43 in the morning on July 2. She reported their position as being on the line 157-337, flying north and south, running low on fuel. Her voice was described as high-pitched and strained, the voice of someone in distress. After that transmission, there was silence. Despite hours of attempts to re-establish contact, the Itasca never heard from Earhart or Noonan again. President Franklin Roosevelt personally ordered the largest air and sea search in American naval history. 65 aircraft and 9 naval vessels searched approximately 250,000 square miles of ocean over 16 days. They found nothing. Not a piece of wreckage. Not a fuel slick. Not a life raft. Not a single object that could be definitively connected to Earhart's aircraft. The search was eventually called off on July 18, 1937. Earhart and Noonan were officially declared dead in January 1939. But a competing theory has persisted for decades. Researchers with the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, known as TIRE, have argued since the 1980s that Earhart and Noonan did not crash into the ocean immediately. Instead, they propose the aircraft ran low on fuel. Earhart made an emergency landing on the uninhabited coral reef island of Nikumaroro, approximately 400 miles southeast of Howland Island, and they survived there as castaways for some period of time before dying. In 1940, British colonial officials discovered a partial skeleton on Nikomaroro along with a sextant box, a woman's shoe, and a man's shoe. The bones were examined at the time by a British physician who concluded they came from a stocky male of European descent. The bones themselves were subsequently lost. In 1998, a forensic anthropologist reanalyzed measurements recorded from those original bones and concluded they were more consistent with a tall woman of European descent, which matched Earhart's physical profile. Tyre has conducted 13 expeditions to Nikomaroro since 1989. They have found artifacts that they believe are consistent with the presence of Earhart and Noonan, fragments of aluminum consistent with a Lockheed Electra, remnants of makeup and anti-freckle cream that Earhart used, campfire sites, and bones from small animals consistent with people surviving and eating. None of these findings have been conclusively proven to be connected to Earhart. A third theory, one that has circulated for decades and has never been fully dismissed, proposes that Earhart and Noonan were captured by the Japanese military after accidentally flying over Japanese-controlled territory in the Marshall Islands. Japan was secretly fortifying these islands in violation of international treaties at the time and would have had every reason to capture, and silence, American witnesses. Some witnesses have claimed over the years to have seen a white female prisoner in Japanese custody in the region during that period. Declassified documents from the period show that the U.S. government was aware of the possibility that Earhart might have landed in Japanese-held territory and that recovering her was a sensitive diplomatic matter. Some researchers have interpreted this as evidence of a cover-up, arguing that the U.S. government had intelligence suggesting what happened to Earhart but chose not to pursue it to avoid provoking Japan in the years before World War II. The truth of what happened in those final hours remains unknown. Earhart's personal effects, her logbooks, and her correspondence provide no clear final answer. The radio communications that day were fragmented and confusing. The search that followed was enormous but found nothing. The theories that have emerged over 80 years are compelling and contradictory. Each one has passionate supporters and significant evidence. None has been definitively proven. Amelia Earhart's legacy extends far beyond the mystery of her disappearance. She broke records, shattered expectations, and demonstrated that women could achieve things that society insisted were reserved for men. She inspired generations of pilots, adventurers, and women in every field. The mystery of her final flight has kept her story alive in the public consciousness in a way that a simple, solved conclusion might never have achieved. Somewhere out there, in the Pacific Ocean or on a remote coral atoll or buried in a forgotten archive, the answer to what happened to Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan may still exist. Researchers continue to search. New technology, new documents, and new analysis continue to produce new leads. But as of today, 87 years after that final radio message, the question remains open. She set out to circle the world and got closer than anyone had ever gotten. And then the ocean swallowed her secret whole.